everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Converza. Today we are sitting down with Christian. I'm thrilled to be talking to him because he's joining us from all the way from Denmark. He has been an acclaimed photographer. He has won several awards. He does trainings, sessions, and I would like to pass this on to Christian at this point so that he can introduce himself to you. Over to you, Christian.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me. So my name is Christian Breinbjerg, that's the Danish way to pronounce it, and I'm a full-time nature and landscape photographer here in Denmark. For the last 2.5 years, it has been my full-time profession. Before that, I was a civil engineer, but I got tired of sitting down at a desk all the day. I switched some things around in my life, and now this is my full-time profession. So I live in an area of Denmark that can roughly be translated to Lake Highlands or the Lake District, basically because we have a lot of lakes. So just in around my town, there's more than 2,500 lakes, and we have a lot of woods and big forests. For a nature photographer, this is like heaven in Denmark, and I spend a lot of time chasing the right moments, the right composition, the right time of the year around my city. So since I started my full-time profession, I have received some recognition both nationally and internationally for my work. And before I got like professional in this, I didn't really join competitions because I do photography for me. But when you try to grow a business, it's nice to have some other people saying that you can do something right. So both here in Denmark, there's the Danish Photographers Association that had a competition where I got the second place in the nature category. I have received from the Federation of European Photographers distinction titles for some of my work. Last year, I got the title as Danish Outdoor Photographer of 2024. And for the last 2 years, I've been part of the Danish national team for photography that competes in the World Photographic Cup. So some different things along the way. Last year, I also was contacted by the magazine called Save Photosite in Germany, which is one of the biggest magazines in Europe for digital photography, that wanted to use one of my photos. And then local newspapers. I was 2 times in television last year to tell about my story and my work. And my work today is that I sell my photos as artwork here in Denmark. That is very locally because people here love the local environment. Besides that, I also do work for companies that want to have nature around them documented, so they can show it to employees, but also to the customers. And then I do I give lectures in photography in photo clubs around Denmark. So it's kind of different things combined, but everything starts with the photograph and with nature, which I love. And for me personally, it always starts with the nature experience. So I can easily go out a morning and return home without any good photos, but I still think it was a nice morning. And sometimes you just don't capture things with a camera that you capture with your eyes and your ears and your nose. So yeah, it's all about nature for me.
I'm sure a lot of us can connect to that.
Yeah.
Excellent. One more question, Christian. You mentioned the World Photography competition, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. What is this event and how does, you participate in that? How does the whole event go about?
So the World Photographic Cup is held every year. The big difference is that you cannot compete as a private person. In every country that competes, there is an organization that is kind of the host for the country. And then you apply. So here in Denmark, it's the Danish Photography Association. And then you apply photos in special category. And then every country can send 3 photos in each category, and I think there's 10 categories. It could be like nature, wildlife, portraits, weddings, sport, and so on. And so for the last 2 years, I have had photos in the competition and thus being a part of the national team. Unfortunately, both years we didn't reach the finals, but it was nice to know beforehand because the finals was in, I think it actually was in Dallas last year.
Oh, excellent.
And this year, I don't even remember, but it was like around the world. But it's just nice to see it, and at the same time you connect with Danish photographers, so the other photographers that are part of the national team. And for me personally, it means that local newspaper reached out and can you tell us about this? And it kind of creates like a little storytelling about your name and what you do, and that is nice too.
Talk a little bit about, what is your photography philosophy? What do you want to capture? How do you go about it? Maybe just give us an overview if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'll just share my screen.
Sure, go ahead.
So everything's good. Okay, so along the way, as I have kind of developed my photography, I have started to make some set of rules for myself. And basically, what I want to do is I want to show people the nature that they know, but in a way that they've never seen it. So that means that I'm trying to chase places in special moments. That could be early mornings, at sunrise, it could be at sunset, it could be like this photo on a very cold winter day.
This is beautiful.
Thank you. And when people see this, if they know it, they could say, I know this place because I walked the dog along the shore here, or my kids are playing here, but I've never seen it like that. How do you achieve something like this? And I actually think that is quite interesting, because if people can recognize it, it kind of creates an emotion in people because they have a certain connection to it. But even then, if they've seen it like 1,000 times and they come to me and say, I've never seen it like this, it means that I must have created something special and not just any snapshot. And yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do here. And this particular example, it was a very cold winter morning, and everything kind of came together. And I can just show you some different things. So here is one of my earliest photos. Actually, it's only 5 years old, but it was kind of the first time that I got a photo where I thought to myself, this is something special. And it was also the first time where I actually did a lot of research, and I have different apps that I'm using on my phone that can tell me in which direction the sunrise will be, at what time it will be. And then I compare that to a weather app and see, is it all cloudy tomorrow, or do I have a chance? So for this photo, I actually got up early. It was a May morning, and got in the car, drove, parked my car, walked to the shore, found my composition, and then just, I think it was like 10 seconds before the sun rose above the horizon, this was the settings. So a lot of these places I have seen many times. I have visited them many times, so I know exactly where to go when the conditions are perfect. And this is a good example, because this little island, I've seen this many times, and I've always thought to myself, how do I get a shot of this? Because on a normal day, you would only see, or you would see the forest behind it, and the island would kind of melt into the background. So I knew I had to wait for like a special moment. And one morning there was a foggy, and then I know exactly where to go. And I went there and waited for the right moment where the fog or the mist lifted just enough to see the island and just get a sense of the background. But it was still like I actually think it's what I do is you could say it's portraits of places. So this is a portrait of this little island, and I say to people, you can go there, you can visit this, but on a normal day, this is not what you're going to look at. You would see the same trees and so on, but it wouldn't look anything like this. And this is a fall morning in October, and this little boat was just lying on the water and was like totally calm, mist over the lake. So the blurriness of the woods in the background, that's completely natural. It's not something I added.
Okay.
And we humans, we know that if we see something where something is clear and something is like misty, then we know the clear thing is closest to us, and what is more blurry is in the background. So in that way, you can actually create a depth feeling in a flat photo, and I think that is quite interesting.
Interesting. Yes. Definitely. And this is a beautiful shot.
I really like it. It was just like it was very easy to get when I was there, but I have never seen it like this again since, and it's almost 3 years ago now. So I'm just happy that I got it.
We would want to let you explain to us what was starting with the concept behind the shot. What was the thinking that was going through your mind? Where was it taken? What time? And as I said, the idea is basically for people like us to go and recreate this.
Yeah.
So over to you on whichever shot you want to talk about.
I think I would like to start with this one,
All right.
and that's primarily because it is one of the photos that have boosted my work the most. It has given me both the place on the national Danish team, the Federation of European Photographers also gave me the distinction award for this one. And I think it's a nice story because 3 years ago I moved from the capital of Denmark, Copenhagen, to the middle of Jylland, which is basically in the countryside.
Okay.
I have this place here in Silkeborg, what's the city called? That has been my second home for my entire life because my grandparents live here. So I've come here for all my school vacations. So the nature here in Silkeborg is very special to me. And when I moved here, I knew that this place was one of the first ones I wanted to visit. And that was in March 22. So I've been to this place a lot of times in that year. And I got like photos of where this island was included, but it wasn't like a portrait of the island. It was, but it was in the photo. And I thought to myself, this is such a nice little island right in the middle of the lake. And I hope that someday I can get what I would call a portrait of the lake, of the island. And so I didn't succeed in that in 2022, but then in 2023, on the 5th of February, it has been a very cold night, and I woke up and I knew, okay, today is the chance because there's still a little snow, and I drove out here and walked through the woods, and I could just feel like the cold biting my cheeks, and I knew exactly where to go and put up my camera. So I'm actually standing on like a little pier where you can have a little boat. And I used my Nikon Z7, the 24 to 120 millimeter f4S lens, and it is just zoomed in, so I think it's around 70 millimeter.
Okay.
And then I always go for what is my base ISO, that is ISO 64, to get the cleanest colors and the least amount of noise. And I always use aperture priority on my camera. So for this, I dialed f11 just to make sure that I got everything from the start of the island to the background. And with the conditions, that gave me around a 6-second shutter speed. So I actually played around with the settings because, as you can see in the foreground, there's some blurriness in the water, which is 100% deliberate. And I also tried like half a second or 10 seconds, but I think this was the nice compromise. And what I really like about it is that in the foreground of the water, you see the island. But then as you come out further, you can actually see there's some like ripples in the water, which makes it more authentic, I think. Because if it was just like a perfect reflection, then you could ask yourself, is it just like flipped in Photoshop and then like some motion blur? But this is the real deal. And I actually think this is one of my photos that I have edited the least. I think what I did was raise the exposure.
Okay.
So this is almost like straight out of the camera. And if you go to this lake in like summertime, you would see the trees out here, they would have leaves on it. So actually you wouldn't be able to see through this island. But here in the wintertime, there's only certain kind of trees that has leaves or needles. So it actually means that you can see through it, and you can actually spot a second island in the background and a third island in the background of that down here.
And I think what we will do for the photographers here who would want to visit this site, we will drop the pin in the description of the video.
Yeah,
But this is interesting. So I think just to maybe go back and discuss a little bit the idea that you brought out of the portraits of locations or portraits of spots, right?
yeah.
When you do that, do you do that with the rules and composition that we normally follow for portraits, or do you actually still compose it like a landscape shot, but bring out the personality of the location more? How do you go about that?
Well, it's an interesting question because whenever I go out to these photography clubs and tell about my work, I show them like a lot of different composition rules. And some people ask like, what is the most important rules and which one should I follow, which one shouldn't I follow? And my number one rule is make the photo that looks great. So basically, I don't follow a single rule every time, but I try to think to myself what would work in this environment. So right here, I don't think I shot it like this. Maybe there was a little more air in the top, but when I edited the photo and cropped it in the end, I tried to make it so that the horizon would go through the middle of the frame, which means that we have equal amounts of light in the top and the bottom. And yeah, so this is basically one where I followed the rule of like kind of like symmetry around the middle. But then again, you can also see that this tree over here, it is not in the center, and it's actually kind of dominant, but it's a bit to the right, so it's kind of like a golden ratio rule. And that was because if you look at the edge of the island here and here, it's not perfectly centered in the middle, but that is because there's a second island in the background that kind of balances it out. And so in that way, I start out by thinking, what do I think would look the best? And in some photos, I try to make like elements in the foreground that your eyes can go through. Perhaps that could be like a path in the woods or something, but this was just like so beautiful without
Yes.
things in the foreground. And the only thing you should look at here is the lake. And some people said to me, I kind of look like an eye or like a
It
ball
does.
or something. But yeah, I'm really happy how it turned out in the end.
Oh, this is definitely beautiful. It's very surreal. It kind of pulls you into, and sort of begs you to draw a little bit of curiosity towards what is on this island and what's
Yeah,
going on. So beautiful.
yeah. It's just that when I got this photo, it was actually one of the first one here from my area that I really really liked, and this is the one that got international the distinction award from Federation of European Photographers, and I was actually kind of proud that suddenly something from my local area will be out there in the world competing in a big competition.
Yeah, definitely. This is definitely amazing. Now, I think you also mentioned the concept behind planning, right?
Yeah,
And planning the shot and knowing exactly what you want to shoot, but then, waiting for the conditions to be like that. How important is that for your photography?
it is everything. Actually, after I got this photo, I made like a YouTube video where I visited the same locations like in the middle of the day.
Mhm.
And these photos, I always bring them out to the photo clubs and show them side by side, and people actually in doubt whether this is the same place, because on a normal day like this, the background would just kind of blend together with this, and you wouldn't see any reflections. And so a lot of times I have got a photo like this that has required planning, dedicated work, and then I come home and I publish the photo, and somebody comments like on Facebook, they say, "Oh, you were just so lucky you were there at the right time."
Yes.
And I normally say it's not pure luck because you don't get a shot like this if you don't go out. But once you are out, you still have to be a little bit lucky that the conditions are right. So
Absolutely.
it's a kind of luck that you have to pursue. And yeah, so I have a lot of photos also of this island that are not very great, but perhaps if you don't get it the first time or the second time or the third time, someday you're going to nail it. And the most important thing is that you know where to go when the conditions are right. And for that, I do a lot of planning. I have in my Google Maps, I put in a needle every time I find a place that could be something interesting. And that means that sometimes when I go to bed, I have a feeling where I'm going tomorrow. But then in the morning, I see, okay, there's a bit of cloud. So actually, I will go to this other place instead. And then I know exactly where to go, where to park my car, and which direction to walk. Because if you woke up and got in the car and then had to decide or just try out, like I'll just drive west and see what happens, then you're going to miss the moment. So there's a lot of planning, and I think perhaps that goes back to the fact that I studied to become an engineer. I am an engineer, and we're kind of nerdy about these things. So I have like apps, Excel sheets, and so on to kind of do all my work. And basically, it's just to optimize my chances of a good photo.
Christian, one other thing that I picked up when you were explaining about this photo is the fact that you have not edited this a lot, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about editing? When you're editing, what gives you the feeling that this is enough? I don't want to go beyond. Because sometimes when you're editing, you can be really strong-handed, right? What is your editing process looking like?
So just like my photography, my editing has changed a lot over the years. And what I always try to remind myself is that I want to look at the final photo and get the same feeling that I got when I was there. And this means that I need to look at the final photo and get a kind of the same sensation of, if you look at this photo, you should be able to tell it was pretty cold, for example.
Absolutely.
But there's still things you cannot convey in a photo. You cannot convey that it was like birds singing or something. So what I try to do is to get the final photo as close to what I was seeing or feeling at the time. And how I do this is that normally I use Adobe Lightroom Classic for this. And I try to do like a we can say a first edition of editing, and then I put it aside, because if you do it right when you come home, you could kind of be like you overwhelmed with feelings. Oh, it was just so beautiful, best morning ever. So I try to do like an early edit, and then I put it aside, and I come back a few days later perhaps, and I make a virtual copy of the original raw photo, and then I try to do my edit again. And in this way, I will end up with two edits. And if those two looks the same, or basically the same, I will think to myself, okay, this is the way to go. This is I'm in the right direction right now, and then I can move on. But if these two like preliminary edits looks nothing like each other, then I have to stop and think, okay, so what am I doing wrong in one of them? Because when you are sitting and moving the sliders to left and right, you can so easily just overdo it, and you won't notice it because it's small increments all the time. But if you put it away and come back, you can look at it and say, what went wrong here? And so in that way, I'm trying to I'll never try to rush it, because then I will miss something. But once I have like two edits that I'm happy with, I can try to move on and do all the final toning, the colors, the lighting, and so on. And I do that in Lightroom Classic. And then in the end, I export it over to Photoshop. And this is where I do the final cropping. And also I can clone things. And my number one rule is, if it was something I could remove by hand, I can remove it in Photoshop. So if there was like a leaf in the sometimes I see it could be like on a nature path through the woods. There can be something that I didn't see, like a branch sticking out. Sometimes a little little cigarette, unfortunately. Something I didn't see when I was there, but I could in principle have jumped in the water and removed this. But I will never put in something that was not there. So I'm not trying to manipulate anybody. I am trying to create the photo that gives me the sensation I got when I took it. And that actually means that when I compare the final photo to the raw photo, the final photo looks more like reality than the raw photo. Because I've met a lot of people who ask, have you used Photoshop? And normally when I hear this, it means that if I used Photoshop, then I've cheated.
Yep.
And I just say to them, yes, I have used Photoshop and Lightroom, but what you're looking at looks very very much like reality, or at least much more than the raw photo. And I think it's because people have camera phones now, and
Yeah.
the phone does its own editing. So, and then people say, hey, look at this. This is not edited. And I will say to them, yes, it is, but you didn't do it. The phone did it for you.
Absolutely.
But for raw photography and a mirrorless camera, you have to develop your own photo. This is my overall goal. I have to be true to myself and the experience. I'm not trying to manipulate anybody, and it has to convey the feeling when I took it. And then I have to, support my own work. So I don't publish anything that I'm not satisfied with. And I need to know that I did a good job. So if somebody says you did something wrong, then I can say, that's your opinion. I have another opinion. And that is something that comes in the process of getting better because you trust yourself more. Where in the beginning, if you put out a photo and somebody said, oh, that's not good, then you would just say, oh, you're right, you're totally right, I will do it again or something. So I will not publish anything until I'm satisfied. And sometimes, like this photo, I knew right away this was a good shot, and like within a week, I had a almost final photo. But sometimes I go back and find photos from 2 years ago, 3 years ago that I didn't see when I first look through the photos, and then I say, okay, maybe I can use this, and then I try to edit it. Yeah, so sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's a year-long process.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that you're happy with what you show.
I think, the question that I have in my mind is about finishing a photo. So once you have finished it, from an editing perspective, do you differentiate when you're finishing it for social media or print? And how do you go about those decisions?
Yeah, so this is the photo I got. It just turned 5 years old, but it's still one of my favorite photos. And just before I answer your question, you can actually see something interesting in this one, and that is, it's a natural phenomenon because in the foreground here, you can see directly through the water, but out here, it's reflection of the sky. I actually put it up on a Facebook group at some point, and somebody accused me of using AI. And then I'm an engineer, so I thought, let me explain this to myself first, and then I can explain it to everybody else. And it's basically just the law of reflection, which means that the water in the front is something you look directly at, so you're looking through the water. But as the angle changes, you get more and more reflection, and you can see this in real life if you look through a window to a store. If you're looking perpendicular to the window, you're looking through it. But if you go to the side and look along the window,
Absolutely.
you get reflections.
Yep, very well explained.
So so when I bring the photo over to Photoshop here, I crop it and I do the last small touches, and that could be an example like this. If I have like stones that kind of annoys my eye, then I could remove it. And normally the last thing I do is what I would call edge patrol. And that is basically that I go along the edge to see if anything is kind of sticking in from the side. And for some reason, when things do that, it kind of draws attention. So that could be like this one down here. It's pretty close to the edge, but you would be able to kind of clone this one out. And when that is done, I export first a full size that I later use for printing, and then I export one where I decrease the size to 2000 pixels on the longest edge, which means that when you upload it to Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, so on, Facebook won't do further compression of the photo. That is at least my experience. And then when I started my photography business, I had to kind of understand how this printing works. So I actually I think I used this photo. I made 4 or 5 edits of this photo and sent it to the print shop and got it back. And that means when I got it back, I could look at the final photos printed out and compare to what I'm seeing on the screen and see which ones are most identical. And what I actually found out was that the things I need to do is I need to raise the light a little bit, both the midtones and the black areas. And actually I saved this as a preset over here on the right. And it's called in Danish optimering, that's optimization number 1, because it was the first one I tried. So the 5 or 4 others I deleted afterwards. So if I run this, you can basically see it got lighter. Yeah. And I can go back and kind of dial it down again, this layer that is. So if you just go back to the original layer, so the first one here actually just raises the blacks a little bit when I turn it on. And this is simply because when you see a photo on paper, it's not backlit like it is on the screen. So if it's completely black on the screen, it will be completely black on paper. So I'm basically just raising the shadows and then raising the midtones a little and just adjusting that so I'm happy. And then I found out if I run this preset, then what I get on paper or on my artworks, I'm satisfied with. And every time that I send something to print, I have the exact file that I send out. So if it comes back and I could say, maybe next time I could maybe just turn it down a little bit, then I would just know for what to do next time I send it out for print. Yeah, so I have a full-size image and I have a small social media image.
That's a very good tip, Christian. I know that these different platforms have different requirements and different compression algorithms that go behind. And sometimes, it requires attention for finishing a shot according to the media that you are going to be using for printing it or, sharing it on the social media. So yeah. Thank you very much for that.
And now, final note: the print shop that I work with, they can both print in Adobe RGB color space and standard RGB color space. So I actually do all my photography and my social media and my photography in standard RGB color space. Basically because I hope that when people see this on their phone, they should see hopefully the same that I do. And it's just what works for me.
This is a very, very powerful composition, Christian. So can you talk a little bit about why did you choose this composition? What did you leave out of the frame? What was the thought process going in your mind when you were looking at this scene?
Yeah, sure. So this is a place in Denmark. It's called Bognæs. It's on the island Sjælland, close to the city of Holbæk. And this is a long shoreline. It's kind of like you can see the other shore on the other side. And then along this shoreline, you find these 3 rows of, it's kind of a fishing net actually. So when I got there, I knew, okay, this is the perfect composition because what you get here is leading lines. And I've heard a lot of people looking at this photo and even coming back and seeing it again, they say, I didn't notice that the first time. So if we zoom in, there's a jellyfish down here. And of course, this net is very clear because, as I just said, you're looking through the water. As you go out, the net kind of disappears, but these small, I'm not sure, it's a buoy.
Yeah.
It kind of takes over and then leads your eye out to what is in Danish a fiskerose, to catch or to catch fish or crabs or whatever it is. So I just knew, okay, I will never find is something so obvious for a leading line like this. And then of course I tried to get this part here in the center and also this part here as much in the center as possible. And then it's actually okay that we get like a little curve here, but we end out in the right place. And then the horizon is almost in the golden ratio, so it's closer to the top than the bottom, because you actually see what you see in the sky, you also see in the water here.
Absolutely.
So if you cut it like here and remove the bottom part, the horizon is actually in the middle. But then you also get the foreground where you see all the details. One time I printed this out on a canvas print. I think it was almost 2 meters in height, 1.8 meters perhaps. And when it gets blown up that big, you can just go in and find all the little details, all the little rocks. I actually think at one point somebody saw like a little crab or something hiding down here. Or...
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I don't know where it is. So it's there.
This is a beautiful shot.
So yeah, so when I got home and edited this, I just knew, okay, it was just as perfect as I hoped to get. And looking back at the time, I was not as good a photographer as I am now. And the fact that it's taking it's less than 30 seconds before the sunrise. And when the sun rose, everything changed quite quickly. And I have visited this place like 5 or 6 times since then in the hope of getting something similar, but I've never seen anything like it again. And
That's definitely
that
beautiful.
is actually when I knew, okay, this is the money shot, right?
Is it focus stacked? How did you go about having that kind of sharpness from the start to the end?
Yeah, so this is actually one single exposure. And it was shot on my Nikon D800 at the time. And I had a 16 to 35 millimeter f4 lens, which was basically my go-to lens every time. And it's shot at 20 millimeters, and it's at f16. So like in the high end, but it was okay. But at the time, I didn't know a lot about where to focus to get to optimize the depth of field. And when I look back at it now, I kind of think, okay, this is pretty lucky that I got this shot, because I only got like 3 or 4 shots before the sun rose of this exact composition. But I'm normally using point focus, and then I have an app called Depth of Field. I know based on my camera, my lens, how much I've zoomed. I know what aperture I need to use to get the depth of field that I want. And I think that in this photo, I must have put it something like here or something. So that would be like 2.5 meters from the camera. Maybe I could have put it like a little bit closer and got a little more sharpness down in the bottom. But if you get too close to the camera, then the background will go out of focus very quickly. And I always try to get a single exposure if it's possible, both in regards to sharpness, but also in regards to exposure. But looking back at it now, maybe I could have used a little, put it like a stop down and got a little darker photos for this part here. But all in all, this is okay.
This is amazing. I mean, it's beautiful.
So today, if I get a opportunity like this, I would probably take I would bracket like 3 or 5 photos, like 2 stops under, 1 stop, 0, +1, +2 stops, just so I know if I get home and I need some details, I can find it somewhere. But I didn't know this at the time when I took the photo, so I only got the single exposure here. And yeah, so this is like without many clouds. And this is of course where the eye should end up. But it could start down here and lead out, and then there's no this direction in the background. And also one thing that I noticed afterwards was that it just got a little air between this part here and the shore on the other side. Otherwise, this part would have moved up and kind of disappeared into it. But now it kind of sits on a clear background. And that's something I've learned through the last 5 years, that when I was here, I spent a lot of time thinking about the settings, and I kind of forgot to check things like this up here, and I was, let's say, I was a bit lucky in that moment. But as I grow more and more confident and I have to worry less and less about my settings, I can use more time doing my composition. So yeah, but
What kind of settings do you have as presets? Do you have like a landscape setting coded into the camera and then you go about, exploring from there onwards, or you just go and decide the settings on the scene?
yeah, I use aperture priority on my camera for like 99% of my photos. And that is because I prioritize the aperture because that is what defines my depth of field, which is normally one of the most important aspects. Then I always keep my ISO to 64, which is my base ISO for my camera. And then I use the metering in the camera to define the shutter speed. And then I can play around with the ISO if I want to change the shutter speed. I can play around with the exposure compensation button. So in principle, I'm still defining all three settings, shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, but I'm getting help from the camera to get there faster. And at some point, many points I've met photographers who said to me, if you're a real photographer, you use full manual every time.
Yeah.
And then I tell them, well, I'm actually in control of all three parts. I'm just getting there faster. And it's especially good because in a photo like this, if you're using full manual and then suddenly the sun rises and perhaps it was behind a cloud, but now it's not, then everything is overexposed. And then you have to dial down, and using the metering in the camera, it just goes faster. So I don't have like any preset put in. I'm kind of starting out with the aperture because I know what aperture I need to use for a certain focal length to get the depth of field, and then I build it from there. But then again, today you have so nice noise handling both in camera and in Lightroom, so I'm not afraid to step it up to.
Do you also go beyond Lightroom like Topaz and others?
No, normally I don't do it. I think I've used Topaz a few times, but now you got this denoise in the Lightroom,
Yeah,
and that is fine for
yeah.
me. And actually,
So,
interesting aspect for my camera, the Nikon Z7. If you look at, you can find a website it's called photons2photos.net, and you
okay.
can see a graph showing how much noise you get at certain ISO values. And for the Nikon Z7, you get lowest amount of noise at ISO 64, and then it grows up until 320, but then it drops again for 400, and then it grows again, which means that it's kind of like a dual base ISO sensor. And that means
All
that
right.
if I'm at ISO 64 and I need to get a brighter composition or brighter exposure, then I would never go to 320. I would always go all the way up to 400 because that actually makes less noise than 320. So if I go into my Lightroom catalog and search my images based on ISO values, I have a lot of 64, a lot of ISO 400. I don't think I have a lot of 320. But that is it's nice to know these things about the
Awesome.
camera when you're out there. You can just as well crank it up.
I think we should definitely put a link to this website
Yep.
in the description.
I
That will
will.
be an amazing input. I never knew about it. I always thought, going to for some reason, I have the stigma of sticking with as low the ISO
Yeah.
is possible, go with that. But this would be a very good information to look at.
Yeah. I will definitely put a link to that.
Excellent. Christian, the third one that you showed us, the most interesting part of that one was the symmetry here.
Yeah.
In these kind of shots, can you actually foresee yourself having the last shot when you are shooting it on the location?
Well, I would like to say yes, but I don't think I can get like the final sensation or the final like idea of it. But this island, I have looked at this island for many, many times on a clear day, and I kind of knew, okay, if I have to make a portrait of this island, it must be some kind of misty, foggy condition because I have to separate it from the background. So on that morning, when I saw the weather forecast, I knew exactly where to go. And actually, when I came here, it was so misty that I couldn't see the island at all. So I put up my camera and actually just waited for the right time. And then the mist kind of lifted, and I got a photo. Then it came in again over the lake. So I got a few photos on different times where the mist was stronger or kind of dissipated a little. And the most interesting fact about this photo, I think, is that the shutter speed is 30 seconds, or at least close to 30 seconds. And that is most visible in the water because you can actually see the water moving even though the water was very calm this morning. But at the same time, the trees are still in focus. And normally, if you expose trees for 30 seconds, then you would kind of see them swaying in the wind. But in this case, it was just the perfect balance. And I got a lot of shots with different shutter speeds to try it out. And I think this is almost the original composition because I knew I wanted to have air around the island. And somebody asked me, why didn't you make like a tighter crop? And I can just show you actually. So if I take it here and move it in to like this, so now the horizon line is still somewhat in the middle. But suddenly it kind of wants to break out of the frame, I think. It doesn't have the ability to breathe. And also the forest, at least in the right side, is a bit more visible in the right side than it is right behind the island. And I've made this as an artwork, and it just looks very good with a brown frame, brown wooden frame
Yeah.
around it, because it has the ability to breathe, and you can just get a sensation of like how big is this island. You could have done like a one-to-one crop and then just all the way in, but I think that's a shame. But you could, because
Absolutely.
it's kind of like this. You use this negative space concept, right? That you show all the things that you shouldn't look at, and then you just focus on almost like a circle here in the middle. So I think this is what I was hoping to get, but I couldn't like see the final photo. And this was in September, so you can see some of the fall colors already, which is also quite nice. So it's not just like a dark green bubble in the middle of the photo. Yeah. So in the end, I think I've envisioned this photo for like almost 2 years, and then I finally got the conditions, and I knew where to go, and I got it, and I'm just very happy about it.
That this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. In fact, all three of them are amazing. I think, yeah, Christian, we are at this time when, unfortunately, although as much as I'm
Mhm.
loving the
Yeah,
conversation,
me too.
we will have to wrap that up. I really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you very much again, and keep on doing, the amazing work that you're doing. Share with these photos with the world, and hopefully we will try to inspire through this talk at least a few people to go out and try something and try these concepts and learn something new.
At least for me, normally if people think about nature and landscape photography, they have to go to Iceland or Faroe Islands or something spectacular. But I'm trying to show that even in a little country like Denmark, you can actually find beauty beyond beyond what you can imagine.
Totally.
If
Yeah,
I can convey that to somebody, that my mission is accomplished.
absolutely. No, that's great. Thank you very much once again, Christian. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a nice
Bye.
day. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode. I really hope something in this conversation sparked an idea, made you pause, and maybe even inspired you to pick up the camera and go create. That's the goal, to learn through stories and shoot better. If you felt something today, do me a small favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. Tell me what stood out and what didn't. And hey, If you've got a friend who's interested in photography or arts, share this with them. Let us build a community where we all grow together. Thanks again for hanging out. Until next time, keep chasing the light.